You're watching JCT TV. This is Bible Study for the 21st century. So friends, this is another JCT show and you're in for a big treat. This will be the fourth of 4 interviews I've done with Musi Maimane, who is the leader of the Democratic Alliance. He is the official opposition leader in the Parliament of the government of South Africa. Just a young man, good friend of mine, former pastor, with a fascinating story, great insights into South Africa today. You won't want to miss that. And then we'll continue as we journey through Matthew. Today we're starting with verse 23 of chapter 21.
Everyone has a story. We'd love to hear about yours. Write to us and tell us about it. JimCantelonToday.com.
Musi Maimane is a young South African politician. I've known Musi since he was a young man. He still is a young man. But I knew him when he was pastoring a little church in Cosmo City in South Africa, here in Johannesburg. He was pastoring in a larger context a few years later, and then entered into politics. And to no one's real surprise, he had a kind of mercurial rise to the point where he is now the leader of the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, in South Africa. Is being a high-profile politician fraught? Do you have various voices and forces attempting to influence you to your benefit? And if and when that happens, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, public life is hard in and of itself, because as public as it is, it's often very lonely. Yeah. But it's also, people are attracted to you for multiple reasons. So you've got to consciously always be alive to where your own sense of control is, where your own authority lies, who are the people that can say no to you. Because being the leader of the opposition, technically, for all intents and purposes, the only other person constitutionally who's higher than me is the president.
Right.
And so from an authority level, you've got to keep reminding yourself that you've got to know who can say no to you, and keep people around you that can keep saying no to you. Because the higher you rise in leadership, the less people can say no to you.
Right.
And the less people are inclined to say no to you, because you're their leader, you're their influencer, and you derive profound power from that. So I think my own faith has had to guide that, to know that I have an authority that is above me. I had to keep my friends who I've worked with, who don't care whether I'm the leader of the opposition or not.
Yeah, just Musi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who can sit down with me and say, hey, what's happening with your marriage? What's happening with this? And people who manage our own finances to make sure that the temptation around self-enrichment never becomes an issue. Yeah. But I think the greatest thing is that keeps you able to say your no, for me anyways, is always a deep understanding of mission. You know, I wake up every day alive to the fact that the things that get me out of bed are the fact that I want to build a South Africa for all, I want to build a South Africa for black and white, I want to build a South Africa where the economy delivers for those people. That's the hope I want to give our country. Anything that disrupts that could be devastating to that. whether it was moral, financial, just a negative influence, that just would be devastating. It's in the same way as a leader of a church, a pastor who preaches certain things, gives people hope and faith. When they fail, they're not damaging just to themselves, they're damaging to people in there. And leading a nation is in some ways not that much different, because you as the leader of that country, that group of people, set a particular benchmark upon which they think, well, it's not that you're the standard, but they derive their sense of what is right or wrong from your actions. And what leaders do is you behave symbolically, and you behave, and for me, the symbolic things always be about, you got to keep a culture of humility, you got to keep a culture of right life and all of that. So we need that in our country, and the sense of mission is something that helps me keep saying yay or nay to something.
Well, absolutely. I'm thinking of the scripture that says righteousness exalts a nation. And indeed, if righteousness does exalt a nation, then it's got to be led by righteousness. And that's not to make you into, the pastor-in-chief of the nation, but at the same time, as you say, there has to be a modeling factor there. You lead by example.
I mean, without trying to disrupt you, one of the things that I have worried about for South Africa, post-1994, of all of its leaders, it's only the current president now who you can point to family, a husband, a wife, and kids.
Really?
Nelson Mandela himself was divorced during office. Thabo Mbeki's wife never played a prominent role. They didn't have kids, so it was always unknown. Kgalema Motlanthe wasn't married. Jacob Zuma had multiple wives. And, the advantage about the US system, maybe it has its criticism, but what comes out of the White House transmits something to a nation. It's not what is said, it transmits something. And South Africa, we need to restore the leadership apex of our country where values must be transmitted. So that when you talk about rape, it's not a question of just crime, it's a question of a father or a mother in the nation saying, this is wrong because all the girls in our country are our girls.
Sure.
And when you talk about HIV and AIDS, yes, it's a access to healthcare question, but there is some component of it that's a question of morality. There is a question of it about how the fabric of society is built around it and how abuse is pervasive in that context, and how do you speak as a leader into that context without trying to be preachy or anything. But the transmission of values from the first office is very important for any nation.
Let me just ask you about South Africa itself. I've been coming to South Africa ever since I was pastoring in Jerusalem, so we're talking back into the mid-'80s. I've been here many, many, many times. I was here before apartheid, after apartheid. Juan Mandela was still in prison when he was out of prison, and I've seen the ups and downs, the ebb and flow of hope and despair in South Africa. All the while, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, in my estimation. I think it has all the beauties of North America compressed into an area the size of Ontario and Quebec. It's phenomenal. I love it here. Are you optimistic? And maybe that seems like a dumb question because you're not going to say no, but where is the hope for South Africa as you see it?
The hope is that we've been here before. I can point to a period in 1990 to 1994. The economic indicators were similar. It felt like the rand was facing a crisis. The jobs numbers weren't good. But those were, like the pregnant woman, birth pains. And I'm feeling the same birth pains today, which tell me that our country is undergoing change. It tells me that where we'll end up on the other side of this should be better than what we've come through. And so I draw hope in that. I also draw hope in the fact that South Africa in '94, people had written us off. It felt as though we were preparing for a bloodbath, and thank God we never went through it. And I don't think we're about to go into another one. There are people projecting it. They're saying we're going to have a land fight, we're going to have that, and certainly in America there have been discussions about farm murders and all of that. I think God has not forgotten about this country. And
go ahead.
The last thing is, South Africans are incredibly resilient. We are the private sector here in South Africa. It's no accident, you know, here we are as a country that's reconciled. It's no accident that we've also had some incredible medical inventions. It's no accident about the fact that it is within the nature and the character of the people of South Africa for them to find a way going forward. And I you know, when I sometimes read on social media about racism taking place, I wake up in the morning and you asked me earlier, why the deer? And I find a white South African sitting next to a black South African, and they're trying to figure out a way forward. Because our people are beautiful. They are forgiving. If they could forgive through apartheid, they'll forgive through this and go forward.
And what's more, you have South Africa's greatest asset, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
who today, as we're talking, has stepped back from Tesla and is now going to save the world economically by taking on the Bitcoin industry. But what a brilliant guy he is. South Africa wasn't the very first heart transplant done?
Yeah.
I think so. And pardon me, there's so many other tremendous innovations out of this nation. As someone from the outside, I'm tremendously optimistic. And I've said to some of my South African friends, you know, the Lord has made such an investment in this nation of himself and his spirit and in millions and millions of people. There's no way he's going to let a few dodgy politicians ruin the nation. I'm just going to ask one last question. What's next for Mmusi Maimane? And I'm not asking you to be a prophet, but do you have some gut instincts? Will you be president one day?
God willing, yeah. And not because I deserve it or anything like that, or any of the above. But of this one fact, I'm convinced that it's irrelevant which political party I'd be serving in. Because I, in my core, believe that we are all made by God. We are all, for the purposes of South Africa, we have a sense, for my wife and I, that God placed us in this nation to continue to fight that South Africans will work together for their prosperity. So, as Dallas Willard once said, worry not about the platform you're called to be on. Worry that you've got something worthwhile to say. I would argue, worry that you've got something worthwhile to do.
And that is a tremendous word on which we will end this series of interviews. Mmusi Maimane, a friend, a pastor, now the leader of the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, and I think one day will be president of South Africa. You can check up on this interview a few years down the line. Thanks for coming our way.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Jim Cantelon Today is a program dedicated to the teaching of the good news of Jesus Christ. This all through the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. JCT also brings to you encouraging testimonies and stories from Christian leaders all over the globe. If this program has added value to your life, would you please consider becoming a partner? To do so, simply contact us by phone, mail, or online.
Here in chapter 21, beginning with verse 23, we have a section, goes right through to the 39th verse of chapter 23, where there's all kinds of various intrigues, controversies, and parables. It's a little bit mind-boggling, actually, you read it. And you have to keep in mind that when Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all four of them wrote their Gospels, they weren't setting out to write, a modern biography. They were just kind of reporting things as they saw them, as they experienced them, and were, jumping around, and there's lots of gaps between this segment and that segment, and it doesn't matter to them that sometimes it's a week or 2 weeks that, transpires before, you jump from verse 20 to verse 21. Not a problem for them. They're not thinking about that, okay? And you have to be aware of that too. And so when I say we're going to be jumping around with intrigues, controversies, and parables, that's exactly what I mean. Now, the first intrigue is here in verse 23 through to verse 27. Now, when he came into the temple, now remember, Jesus had just cleansed the temple, made a huge mess. It's a wonder they allowed him back in, but they did. The chief priests and the elders of the people confronted him as he was teaching and said, by what authority? What authority? That's a big word for them. Are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority? But Jesus answered and said to them, I will also ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you with what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, where was it from? From heaven or from men? And they reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he'll say to us, why then did you not believe him? But if we say from men, we fear the multitude, for all count John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus and said, we don't know. And he said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Pretty clever of Jesus. He was never bested in any of these confrontations with these very intelligent men. Authority. Authority is huge. It's huge in academia. And if you've ever done a master's or a doctoral degree, well, if you've even done an undergraduate essay, you can't just give your own ideas. You have to show a bibliography, all the books you've read, and anyone you quote, you have to properly footnote it. You've all done that. I've done that. And when you read academic tomes, as I do all of the time in preparation for what I'm doing now, and also in the book writing I'm doing, I'm reading all these authorities, and, a guy makes a comment, and he said, but so-and-so said it, and back in 1776, and then so-and-so said it again in 1923, and more recently in 2001, such and such a scholar quoted. Okay, that's quoting authorities. And you cannot do a bachelor's, a master's, or a doctoral degree without quoting authorities. The similar principle applies to Jewish scholasticism in terms of rabbinic oral law. It wasn't enough for some rabbi to say such and such is the case to make a proposition without support. He had to say, Rabbi Hillel said, or Rabbi Akiva said, or, back during the Caesarea era of the Talmud being written, there was a certain study that said, okay, authority. The Sanhedrin, which was the ruling authority in Jerusalem, and there were other Sanhedrins, by the way, in other parts of Israel, they were always asking of any rabbi, where did you study? Who was your rabbi? Who was your teacher? And they would, of course, have to respond and quote their authorities. Because certainly nobody was smart enough, capable enough, or authoritative enough to make some statement of truth just on his own. Well, in Matthew 7, verse 29, we read this several weeks ago. As people are reflecting on Jesus' teaching in the Nazareth synagogue, they made the observation, he has authority not as the scribes. He doesn't quote anybody. He just quotes himself. This is really strange. How can he have the temerity to do that? As we say in Hebrew, eze chutzpah. Who does this guy think he is? That was one of the reasons why, his own friends and neighbors rejected him in Nazareth, because we knew him when he was a kid. I mean, So this is exactly what's going on here. By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority? Which rabbi did you sit under? And if we can show, if you show us who you sat under, and it's a rabbi that we show respect to, then maybe we got something to talk about. Well, Jesus answers them in such a clever way. I mean, it's just so Jesus. He challenges their right to question him on the ground of precedent, basically. Had they questioned John the Baptist? If so, what was the result? If not, what right had they with this inconsistent approach to question him? Well, he knew they hadn't questioned John the Baptist. They just condemned him outright. They hadn't asked him about his authorities. The guy's to be dismissed. And Jesus is saying that is not due process. If you want to question authority, then what you're doing is you're questioning process and protocol. If you didn't pursue process and protocol with John, what right do you have to do it with me? This question forced a real conundrum. These guys had gone to John's baptism. Bible tells us that all of Judea used to go down to John as he baptized people in the Jordan River. They'd all gone down, and at one point they had accused him of being possessed by a demon. In a sense, in going down there, they'd been open, but in a sense not open to John's legitimacy, and they had not questioned his authorities. Right? So when Jesus asked them, did you question John's authorities? And if you did, then why did you reject him? The people are fearful of both appearing, these priests and scribes are fearful of both appearing to be calloused to the ministry of John, the prophet, and they're also afraid of offending the people who believed in John. So they realize they're caught betwixt and between here. Jesus has got them right in the corner. So they balk. So Jesus says, you balk, I balk. You won't tell me why you didn't question John's authority, so I am not going to respond to your question as to my authority. This lame response from you guys, you've been mandated to distinguish between false and true prophets, and here you're saying you can't. You can't tell me if John was true or false? This is really weak, fellas. You see, the scribes and the Pharisees, the temple priests, were caught in a real dilemma. Two questions. What's true? What is safe? What's true? What's safe? You and I get caught in that dilemma too, once in a while. What is true has to do with principle, has to do with conviction. What is safe has to do with expedience, political correctness, comfort. If you fear the people in the face of truth, and you yield to your fear of the people rather than acknowledging the truth, you're basically wimping out. What Jesus did here was expose these virulent critics of his as weak. And you can be sure they felt it. You can be sure this contributed to the growing momentum. We got to get rid of this guy. The plot eventually that would emerge to put him to death. Jesus just would not tolerate any person or persons who tried to undermine the work of the Spirit of God. He was true to his convictions. He was even willing to die for them.
Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 3 is here. This booklet covers Matthew chapters 8 through 16, and Jesus' signs and wonders play a major role. Lepers are healed, the dead are raised, nature is subdued, demons are cast out, and Jesus and Peter walk on water. Jesus' teaching both in parables and one-on-one with the disciples is captured in detail. We'd like you to have your copy of Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 3. If you're already a monthly partner, it will be sent out to you automatically in the next few weeks. If you'd like to order Volume 3, you can call us 519-415-8341 or write to Jim Cantelon Today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7, or visit us online, jimcantelontoday.com. Request Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 3, and for a gift in any amount, it will be sent out to you.
I fill in the blanks, friends, with Cantelon's Casual Commentary. Volume 4 is about to come out. Here's 1, Matthew 1 to 4. Here's 2, Matthew, I'm sorry, I'm doing it backwards here. Here's Matthew 1 through 4. Here's Matthew 5 through 7, Sermon on the Mount. And here's Matthew 8 through 16. And I've done them this way so I can put them in an envelope, send them to you as cheaply as possible, although I hope the writing's not cheap. I know a lot of you are enjoying them, and I'm getting more and more demand for them. Once the 4th one is out, then I'm going to produce them in one single book, about 160, 180 pages. That'll be available in bookstores. I'm giving you these because you're giving to us. It's a mutual admiration society. Television is very costly, and television needs you. You know that. We don't sell commercials. We really appreciate your help. And also, you'll see from time to time references on the program to Working for Orphans and Widows. That's the missionary arm of Jim Cantelon and my wife, Kathy. We want to do both. We want to expose the scriptures as effectively and as casually as possible, hoping that it will contribute to your spiritual growth. But also, we want to care for the least of these, orphans and widows in their distress. We've been doing it now for 18 years. And so we have a pulpit here and we have a mission there, in South Africa, in Malawi, and in Zambia. And we're about to move into a few other countries too, and I'll fill you in on that when that happens. But friends, we always need each other. And whether it's JCT or whether it's WOW, you know what you can do. You can help us. And as you help us, you're really contributing your time and treasure and talent to the Lord's work. Appreciate you doing it. Thanks so much for that. See you again next time. Bye for now.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon Today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon Today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.